Hello everyone, I'm Em from the Northwest Nikkei Museum and Wing Luke Museum of the Asian Pacific American Experience, and I want to welcome you all virtually to the Seattle Japanese Language School buildings that were originally constructed in 1913, 1917, and 1920. While these spaces today see a wide range of use from the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Washington's operations, including exhibits and events, the Seattle Japanese Language School still remains at the core of the JCCCW's operations. Although our classrooms look a little different today than they did back when the language school first began in 1902, throughout the years, these buildings have provided a wide range of services and opportunities to the Japanese American community. While I would love to talk to you about all of the different projects we have going on, today I am pleased to get to share the history of the Seattle Japanese Language School buildings that our museum sits in. Specifically, the history of the Hunt Hotel, a site of temporary housing that once took up the halls, classrooms, and dojos of the SJLS buildings. The stories, knowledge, and information shared in the Hunt Hotel exhibit catalog, and this video are the product of over a decade of dedicated research that not only helped unearth the history of the Hunt Hotel, but also helped provide a deeper understanding of the resettlement period immediately following the closing of the camps. While the over 130 individuals who lived in the Hunt Hotel are only a small portion of the thousands of Japanese Americans who had to rebuild their lives after the war, their stories and the story of the hotel itself displays many of the common occurrences and problems that returning Japanese Americans faced. The story of the Hunt Hotel begins far before the end of the war, far before the incarceration of Japanese Americans, and before the Seattle Japanese Language School enrollment peaked in the 1930s with over 1,300 students. It was even before the first students took classes at the Japanese Language School in 1902, beginning instead in the 1890s, when the Seattle area Japanese American community began growing, leading to the formation of Seattle's Nihon Machi in a section of what is now known as the Chinatown International District. It was between the 1890s and 1900s that many of the hotel's residents began to build their businesses, families, and lives within the Seattle area. Of the many residents who passed through the Hunt Hotel, some included Japanese Americans who served as community leaders and business owners before and after the war. Take, for example, Genji Mihara, a prominent community member who served many roles throughout the neighborhood, including as vice president for the Seattle Japanese Language School Parent-Teachers Association. Or Frank Okada, who ran an insurance business in Nihon Machi. Or the Arizumi family, who operated the main drug company, including their daughter, Kyo, who became one of the first graduates of the University of Washington School of Pharmacy. These are just some of the many families and individuals who would eventually come to live in the Hunt Hotel. During the War Relocation Authority, WRA, forcibly removed Japanese Americans from their homes and communities, leaving a question mark above the future of Nihon Machi. While communities displayed incredible strength and resiliency in the face of nationwide xenophobia, racism, and prejudice, there was no doubt that with community leaders arrested and family and friends in camp, Nihon Machi would be much different when they returned. As the camps began to close, Japanese Americans were left with $25 and a question: where to settle now? Reports of continued anti-Japanese rhetoric and violence had already made it clear that resettling in historic Japanese American spaces and neighborhoods would not be a widely accessible and safe option. Ultimately, while many Japanese Americans did decide to settle further east, nearly 60% of Japanese Americans returned to the West Coast in 1945, including returning to Seattle's Nihon Machi. All across the country, Seattle included, finding housing after the war was difficult for Japanese Americans, with a coast-wide housing shortage and rampant anti-Japanese sentiment posing barriers to housing. A select group of organizations sought to find spaces to set up temporary shelter and housing for those who would be returning from camp. In the end, the SJLS buildings were chosen as just one location of many across the West Coast to become temporary housing for the Japanese Americans who were returning home. Originally envisioned as housing for older Issei men, the Hunt Hotel quickly became housing for both families and Issei who had difficulty finding housing and jobs upon the end of the war. With over 130 individuals passing through the Hunt Hotel, the classrooms within the buildings were separated into families' living quarters, using sheets hanging on ropes, drawers, luggages, and other items that could be used to divide up the space between the families who shared rooms together. Thanks to the wide ranges of backgrounds, ages, and individuals who stayed in the Hunt Hotel, the daily life of the hotel was always bustling. Mothers, wives, and other young women would cook meals and tend to the garden outside. Issei men would read the newspaper in their quarters, and children could be found playing all throughout the hallways and fields in and surrounding the building. Many of the past residents remember different aspects of their time living within the Hunt Hotel. Some remember the lack of privacy, others remember the social time it awarded their mothers and fathers. Ultimately, this space means so many different things to all of the different individuals who spent time living within its walls. For many families, their time at the Hunt Hotel ended within a few years, and by 1950, most of the residents had moved out save for a few Issei men. In 1959, William Koshiyama, the last remaining resident of the Hunt Hotel, took his own life, marking the end of the Hunt Hotel. While the Hunt Hotel has not been an active housing space for over 60 years, the memories and stories of the Hunt Hotel will forever remain integral to the story of Seattle's Japanese American community and to the story of the Seattle Japanese Language School buildings.